Welcome to the Screen MDM Talks podcast hosted by me, Mancha Daswani. This week our sponsor is MD Media Biz.
Four decades is a remarkable story. What was the initial vision for this company 40 years ago?
Actually, to be honest, there wasn't any. No real vision. It was just, I've always loved the movies. And ever since I left my previous job running a management consulting business that became part of Deloitte's internationally and went back into the family business, I decided that I always wanted to have something to do with media, with movies or TV shows, because I grew up watching a lot of it, right? And so that was really the whole genesis of it. It was like no grand plan, no inspiration that came out of the air. It's just something I wanted to get into. And so the first chance I could, using our own resources, was to get into it, right? And that was 40 years ago.
Remarkable. Now, Min showed me this amazing picture of you at one of your early MIPS and MIPComs.
I think it was his first.
Remarkable. Now, obviously, I feel like Asia is still often an afterthought, I think, in the global conversation about media. 40 years ago, it was barely a blip. So building the business from that point, tell me sort of how you overcame some of those initial, like Asia, what, Malaysia,
Contrary to everything else, US programming worked so well in Asia in those days that nobody else got a look in. Right? And so all the US majors were sitting in such a comfortable space. Everything ran, everything that you had in America, we had it out in Asia. You name it, Magnum PIs, Miami Vice, everything else, right? And so the challenge for us was that because the product was selling itself, the US companies didn't really need anybody to do the work for them.
Right.
Right. So unless you can find a way to deliver value to the table,
Yeah.
there was no need to put you in as an agent or give you a cut of something. Right? So what spawned us, or what gave us the opportunity, was that because back then all the US majors had a headquarters for Asia Pacific in Sydney, and a lot of them still do, right? So I took a trip to Sydney, met with all of them, Paramount, Fox, Warner Brothers, and everyone. Some didn't want to see me. Some gave me the time of day. And the only one who actually took a liking to me was Warner Brothers. He had a set of movies. He had 5 movies that he couldn't sell. He had gone around showing to all the broadcasters, but he couldn't sell it because the prices he wanted was too high. And the biggest title in that package of 5 movies was Superman, the first Christopher Reeve Superman.
The best.
Right. And there was such a big hit for everyone that it was, he wanted really big bucks for it. And so what we did was, he says, you take these 5 titles, you sell it, and then you come back, we'll do business. So I went back after that whole trip to Sydney. I went back with 5 titles, and I decided, and you got to now figure out what can you do, because if you go back to the TV stations, everyone's seen them, didn't want them, or couldn't afford them.
Wait,
right?
didn't he also say that I've showed I'll tell you that I've showed these 5 titles to everybody and nobody wants them?
No, because they
nobody
wanted
can pay
them.
for them.
Yeah, they can't afford them
They
because
couldn't afford them.
they can't make it work financially.
Yeah.
And so we went about thinking about, trying to figure out what's the angle for this. And somehow, I would almost say by luck or fluke, it so happened that we were coming up into an Olympic year. And the cigarette boys were very big in advertising in those days. And so the Benson and Hedges, it was always a fight between Benson and Hedges and Dunhill. And Benson and Hedges had the Olympics, which means that the other guy really had to write itself off for the next 3 weeks of the Olympics or whatever, right? And so we then went to Dunhill and said, look, what if we put together a film festival and have the biggest English language, Chinese, Malay, and Indian movies strung throughout that period when the Olympics is playing, so that there is an alternative for you. There's a counter way of doing this, right? And the Olympics back then was always carried by the government station, which is RTM. And we had the first commercials TV station called TV3 was set up then, less than a year old. And so we figured this is really the best way to do it is put into TV because the TV station will be sitting dead while the Olympics is going on at the other side, and Dunhill would have spent the money fruitlessly, for instance, right? So we put it all together, counter program the Olympics, built this movie festival, and it worked.
Brilliant.
And the only problem then was the TV station said that we've already know what price these movies are being asked for, so this is what we pay you. And so we made no money on the Warner Brothers movies, but we got our in with Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
So the first time we went to MIP at that time, we would walk up to everyone and they say, you're new, so who do you do business with? And inevitably, every time we say Warner Brothers, they say, if you're good enough for Warner's, let's talk, right?
Yeah.
And so that was really the breakthrough. But it's us having to somehow come up with a different way of justifying our value to the studios. And eventually, you fast forward, we were actually handling most of the US majors business in Asia, from Warner Brothers to Universal to everyone else.
That's amazing. Now, Min, family business was joining the family business always on the planner for you, or did it come later? What was the thing?
I always tell people that I was inceptioned because he's a really good salesman. So he knows how to play the long game. Actually, I think for about 5 minutes, I wanted to be a doctor. That quickly went. But actually, I think I was 12 when he brought home this, and it's showing my age, because he brought home the Laserdisc box set of the original Star Wars trilogy. And we watched it.
You see, the first 3 Star Wars movies were all made before she was born. And so
that's really giving away my age. My father just aged me.
It's fine.
And I'd never seen it, and he brought them home, and it was this. And, the Laserdiscs were like way big, right? So the box is like massive. This black box, he puts it down on the table. And so we watch it, and we watch it in one night. We watch all 3 movies.
Yeah, all 3 movies in one night.
And I don't know whether it's the best decision he ever made or the worst decision he ever made, because two things resulted from it mainly. One is that I was so blown away by it. I was like, this is what I want to do in life. So the other thing was, I was so blown away that I decided that I would write a letter to George Lucas. So I wrote a letter, 12-year-old me wrote a letter to George Lucas. And at that time, I think we were handling consumer products, right?
Yeah, we were doing consumer products for Warner Brothers, for Universal, for LucasArts, right?
Yeah.
So we were doing all the Indiana Jones and Star Wars and everything else. And
so Dad got my
the letter through the system.
Yeah, he got it sent back. And I got a reply, not from George himself, which I set this up and everybody's like, from George. And I'm like, no, not good enough for George. 12-year-old me was not good enough for George. But I got a reply from his PA, his personal PA saying, Mr. Lucas read your very kind words and blah, blah, blah. I can't even remember what I wrote, to be honest. And then and she put me on a lifetime subscription of what was the Insider magazine. Now, the Insider magazine, I don't know if you've ever seen it, right? But the Insider magazine comes every quarter, and in the Post, and it's got all the Star Wars and Indiana Jones updates. But at the back, it's got a mail order catalog.
Yeah,
and
she wanted to buy everything.
Every quarter, I would have like, oh my God, I want this, and I want this, and I want this, and he would obviously have to battle that, both my parents, and then till today. People still buy me Star Wars presents. You go to the DV office and everybody teases me because they say it looks like a Lucasfilm office. The number of Star Wars posters I have up, it's still my screensaver. I wish I had my mobile phone to show you because it's also my wallpaper.
Ew.
I've had to move stuff from the house to the office. People buy me presents for ages 3 and up, Lego, whatever, but what I do have that actually came from Dad that I actually stole from him, and it's in my house here, is the original Darth Vader helmet made from David Prowse's
mold, the original mold, yeah.
But made from the original mold, because a few years later they sized them down for retail because he had a really big head, right? And so I have it here, and I have Lego, I have pizza, I have 3 lightsabers.
That is remarkable. I know, I love the story so much.
My first time to the US was also the first time I saw Star Wars in a Man-Chinese theater in LA.
Oh my
And
God.
I was so taken by it. It's mind blowing. At the opening scene where there's, what was
The
it?
Super Star Destroyer comes.
The Star Destroyer just come looming over
There's
you.
the rebel ship. And
And
then you
this,
see the lasers.
and no, and this really big, huge screen, and you're some boy from some poor country, and you're looking at this thing, and it's like, wow.
No, and at that time, no one had done the crawl.
Right. Right.
The crawl,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
No one had done the crawl, and no one, and it was
No,
George.
and the John Williams soundtrack,
Yes,
the intro. I mean,
Yeah.
it was
yeah, and also
anyway. So
he-
that was it. That was how she got into the business.
That's amazing. So I feel like I'm due for a Star Wars rewatch now. I haven't rewatched the original trilogy in years.
I mean, they're great.
They're so good. So we talked at the outset about Vision Entertainment being just sort of the parent company. Tell me a little bit about the launch of Double Vision, why that was important, and I guess the overall impact it's had on the company's trajectory over the last few years.
Yeah. So again, I wish that I could tell you that there was this grand vision of how I see things so many years ahead, but it wasn't. What we did was we started at what I thought was the easiest entry level, which is distribution.
Right.
Right. Our business trade all kinds of stuff, commodity, rubber, rice.
Mm,
Why not television rights? That was a simple thinking in
Sure.
those days, right? And so from distribution, which is the easiest entry point, just because it's just trading, we then started to notice that with a few years down the road, local production started to take precedence somehow, even though the quality was a lot lower compared to the Americans, obviously, and the cost of producing local was much higher than what you would pay for an hour of U.S. primetime programming, right?
Yeah.
So it made no sense, but it resonated with the locals and they love it. And which means that immediately, or not immediately, but very quickly, we realized that you've got to remain in the business. You've got to be in that space producing local shows,
Yeah.
which is where Double Vision came from. So it's meant to be a play from Vision, which became like Vision 2, or it became Double Vision, where, you kind of, your eyes go blur on you, kind of play on the words, right? So it
Yeah.
started with Double Vision production. And then from there onwards, as we see technology being introduced, special effects, and all the other side of things, we then got into that and then started introducing technology into the business, and then eventually spawning an animation unit out of it, which went into not just doing production services for Hasbro and all the others, but we even had a console game that won a BAFTA, co-produced with our English partners, Codemasters. So it's literally taking the step as you can see the trend coming, right? And so
Right.
then when they had set-top boxes, then we went into the software engineering that's required to make it interactive and for you to literally make content deliverable to the different systems. So we
That's so
kind of, in the end, position Vision as this black box in the center, and you take news, entertainment, whatever information there is into it, we can regurgitate it, massage it, animate it, put special effects, languages, etc., and then put in the technology that makes it deliverable to any format you like, be it online, satellite delivered, free to air, and so forth. That's
Right.
how we evolved, literally.
You know what? He keeps saying there was no vision. But what he's not telling you, I think, is that they came from consulting. They came from management consulting.
Yeah.
And management consultants are highly strategic, right? I mean, when he started Vision Plus, which is the first Vision company, obviously, and that's the distribution arm. Vision Plus, I mean, there was, I think, only one other company trading television rights. Only one other company,
Yeah.
right? And I think the way we've always looked at our business is in many ways quite strategic. We've always said, okay, like, where do we want to sit? And we've always sat squarely in the content space. And there's been
Yeah.
lots of opportunities, I think, for us to go into platforms and to go into, all kinds of other things. And we're saying, look, platforms come and go, right? I mean, and I think now we've been around long enough to know this for certain. Platforms come and go, but
Yeah.
content will never, I mean, the way you deliver it, how you make it, that may change. But the fact is that people are always going to need some kind of
Yeah.
content.
Well, that's the only thing that makes people spend money on. whether it's advertiser money, consumer money, whatever it is, but somebody's got to pay for it. And they're
Yeah.
happy to pay for it. You go to a cinema to buy a cinema ticket for it, right?
Yeah.
And so we have always, we decided that we were going to sit squarely in the content space,
Mm.
and we had remained throughout
Yeah.
all those
I
years.
think that philosophy hasn't changed, you know? Like, I think that's been a philosophy that's been there from the very beginning, and it
Mm.
served us very well. I mean, we've tried different things, and as any business, right? You go through trying out different things of the time, but what really has remained is the content.
Yeah. And then you mentioned your dad comes from a management consultancy background. You come from a clear creative background. You've been group CEO for 3 years now. So, you know, your vision, your strategic direction is going to be different. Lay that out for me, sort of what you wanted to do when you came in. You came in at what was a weird time in the business anyway. The last few years have been a little bit chaotic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And COVID, we actually had COVID as well,
went through
remember? The
COVID.
Yeah.
shutdown. Yeah.
Actually, it's not quite right. So I wanted to go. Actually, I wanted to go to film school, and like any responsible Chinese parent, he talked me out of it. Actually, he sold me out of it. He sold me out of a few things. He
Very
sold me out of
smart.
film school, and he said, "Look, you have a production studio right here, and you can learn on the job. But what you need, and in hindsight, of course, he was right. At the time, we fought a lot. You know, like what you need is really some business skills. You need to know how to
Mm.
build business, how to look at business, how to evaluate businesses, right? And so he said, go learn on the job, but then go and get a degree, go get a business degree. Because when you have a business degree, you can actually do anything. It gives you options.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I started
Yeah.
PAing at DV. So I started to PA at DV when I was 16. I've kind of done through the years every different job on a set. And then I went to school. I went to university,
Yeah.
and I did business management as a degree. And so when
Smart.
I came out, you know, for us, we have a family business, but it's no guarantee of a job. In fact, they don't want you, when you come out, they don't want you fresh. In his words, and I'm sorry, I'm going to swear, but he's like, let somebody else pay for your fuck ups. So I went out and went to work for Star TV in Shanghai. I was in Shanghai in like the heyday of Shanghai, earning
Mm.
really, really good money. And then he said, and I spent 4 years, I didn't want to come home, spent 4 years there. And then he calls and actually, it was a couple of things. My mother, we found out she had cancer, and she's in complete remission now, and she's great. But one of these things, and I have been away for 10 years, including boarding school, including university, including Shanghai. I was like, okay, maybe it's time I go home. So I went home, went for a little bit back to work at Vision Plus for Pauline, actually. So she was also my boss.
Wow.
So I went back to work for Pauline, and so Dad and I had a salary negotiation, which was very awkward because I was earning very good money in Shanghai, and he cut that by half, right? And you know it's bad when my mother, who is your typical, like, very, very, very frugal Chinese woman, said to him, don't you think it's a bit much? And the other very awkward conversation was I said to him, what do I call you, right? I don't know what to call you. Like, it's weird because
Yeah.
like, it's very strange, you know, especially in meetings. So it ended up, so he said, what did you tell me? You should tell her what you told me. It's a very bad dad joke.
Which one?
CO.
Which one? First you say, what do you call me, right? Or do I call you dad? Do I call you Mr. Lim? Oh, boss or what, right? So because I've always practiced, we have this practice in the office where we all call each other by our first name.
Mm.
So I'm tagged to everyone. And so I said, do that, right? Then she says, okay, what's my title? What's my job title? I said, CEO.
No,
And she
COO.
says, COO. And she says, no, it can't be. I just joined. What do you mean COO? I said, why not? She says, why? I don't have the stature. I said, you do, you're a child of owner.
I'm telling you,
Hence-
it is the worst dad joke ever. So then,
It makes sense though, man. Like,
and then the opportunity came up to actually go and work for Government Linked Private Equity Fund. Dad said to me, I think you should go work for him. And I said, why? It's finance. It's boring. I hate it. I left union. I don't want to do it. And he said,
Yeah.
no, you should. And I went to Equinas. So I took time out of
Oh.
TV, of media, and worked in private equity for 4 years.
wow.
And I realized that actually it was a great move because at some point in time, you need to know how to value a business. And
Absolutely.
that's exactly what they were doing. And you need to know how to talk to bankers. You need to be able to present to them what they want.
Well, for a
you-
start, you need to be able to read a set of accounts, right? And
read
see
a set of accounts.
layers behind it.
Yeah. And so I spent,
Thousand
and I actually was the only non-finance person at Equinas, and I had a great time.
Yeah.
The team was great. I loved it. I learned a lot, and that's kind of really stood me in good stead for actually
Yeah.
running the business. So it was, and I was having so much fun that again he had to call about and say, "Don't you think it's time you come home?" And that was maybe in a total of 8 years out
Wow.
of the business. So I didn't come home till 8 years later. And I started at DV. I started at DV, and I think it was maybe 10 years or 8 years before I got made CEO.
That's amazing.
Right. So I
That's
started as
amazing.
something the most vague you can start is business development, right? Business development. And I kind of just sat there and observed because I think often people go in and it's very new broom sweeps clean. But I was going into a company where many people had seen me grow up because I think dad's grandfather and my grandfather's philosophy is we've always been a very paternalistic family. And
Mm.
so we've always had people who have remained with us for many, many years. I was going into a company where many of them had seen me grow up. They'd seen, and I didn't want to come in and throw my weight around because it happens a lot and nothing good ever comes from it. So I kind of sat there for a year and I looked at it and I wanted to see how things work and why, right? Because
Mm.
often I think you have to understand why things are the way they are before you try and change anything,
Yeah.
So I kind of observed it. And then our head of production left. So I then took that over. And
Mm.
that's when I said, okay, let's go do some different things. Let's try and do some more regional and pan-regional production. So that
Yeah.
started in my time.
Actually, to give you some context, we started doing production in Malaysia, and we were quite successful at it. But
Mm.
it remains in Malaysia, producing at a very low budget, which means that the products you produce cannot travel
Right.
anywhere else. Plus, because you don't have enough meat in it. Plus, in those days, you don't even retain rights. So everything went to the people who commissioned you, which are the broadcasters, right? Anyway, we grew to a point where we could retain rights, but even
Yeah.
then, it was still within a small country. So we then expanded into Indonesia and then into the Philippines, and so we became uh, a regional production company rather than just Malaysia.
Right.
The problem, however, was that even in Indonesia and the Philippines, where the budgets were much, much bigger, we were still producing local fare, which doesn't travel, which addresses what the local market needs, but it doesn't travel, right?
Yeah.
So at some point, we've decided that we should really go and be pan-regional. While we retain all this local production outfit, but we have to go be pan-regional, and which means producing initially for the AFCs, the Asian Food Channels, Discoveries, or whatever, and all the what's the Are You Tough Enough for
Oh, for
AXN and
cakes and for
cakes, yeah.
TLC.
So eventually, you go from there to producing for HBO Asia, right? And
Yeah.
Netflix. So
Yeah, I mean, tell me more about sort of the international vision for the future. You've done some collaborations already in the US and the UK. How are you looking at the global market opportunity right now, sort of outside of your neighboring markets?
So I think like whenever we look at Malaysia, and obviously the Singaporeans always look at me and say, really, when I tell them this problem, Malaysia, I feel is very limiting. We
Mm.
have not a very small population, a decent sized population, but the problem is, it's very fragmented, right? And so
Yeah.
the content space is as well. So what we've realized from day one, I think pre my time, is that if you want to do anything of scale, you kind of
Mm.
have to be outward looking.
Yeah.
And so we made the bridge, and I've always wanted that. And so I started with Pan Regional, right? It was easier to go to Singapore and to speak to the guys based in Singapore, and to talk about doing all the non-scripted shows. So for a long time,
Yeah.
we were doing all the cooking, then all the non-scripted because that was really what people were producing. It was only HBO that was producing really high-end scripted, regional, right? Pan Regional scripted.
Yeah.
And then we did the bridge. And I think the
Right.
bridge is a really, really landmark deal because it was the first time that, firstly, Malaysia does not do formats, let alone scripted formats, right?
Yeah.
And this was, I mean, not just for Malaysia, but it was also the fact that we got HBO, View, and Media Prima in the first season to share rights, and that actually was all done by Dad. It was a
Wow.
really, really tough way to make a living because we just ended up making the show, but we really believed in the show and we believed in something that was like that we could make for for premium audience, but also at a price.
Yeah.
right? And that was the only way we were going to get them to do it, because gone were the days of the HBO originals that had a really decent price tag.
Yeah.
People started tightening the belts. So, Dad actually sat, it was Kingsley, Jonathan, and Johan Ishak, right, at the time, and
Yeah.
sat them all down in the room and said, okay, let's talk. And because of the relationship, we could get that done.
Yeah.
They all went at the same time, because they came to realize that they didn't see themselves as competitors.
Right.
They were competing systems, right? So before they would bridge, they never thought that they could sit down and try and do a show together, because it's either mine or yours. But we somehow was able to give them all branding rights. In other words, they were all branded as originals. This was a View original, a HBO original. We just have to stagger the windows. Who went first?
Slightly.
Yeah.
It wasn't
Yeah.
even by weeks, it was by hours.
Hours, yeah. But
Wow.
it was a first in many ways for
Yeah.
these people to actually come together and sit down and actually carve out rights and say, okay, you do this, I do that. And it was good enough for them to do a second season,
Yeah.
right? And so they used to say, Jonathan Sping, who ran HBO at that time, used to say, we only came together because they knew me and they trusted me. That it was a very much a personal thing, that you could actually
Yeah.
put competing parties together to literally sit down and work out.
I mean, we made the bridge, and it did really well for us. And what it really showed us was that we could make some really premium programming coming out of Malaysia at a price. And if we made it with a quality, or made it to a quality that was acceptable around the world, or
Yeah.
that would stand up, it didn't matter. And COVID did really help us with that, but it didn't matter the language.
Right.
Anybody would watch it, right? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, we are the most widely sold Malaysian made show today, right? We've been as far as Australia, we've been as far as the Knowledge Network in
Yeah.
Canada, so Stan in Australia, we've been in South Africa, we've been in China, so we've been in all these different regions.
Yeah.
And there's always been this thing that Malaysian made stuff doesn't travel, and it doesn't travel. But if it's made the right way, it will travel, right?
Yeah.
And so and then I think over the 2 seasons, it became probably the country's most internationally awarded show. So the 2
Yeah.
seasons together, we have over 22 awards and nominations, international awards and nominations.
Insane.
And so we actually finished shooting the second season in March 2020. We did so well, but we couldn't parlay that into anything else,
Right.
because the world was all shut down. But what was amazing was through the relationships that obviously Dad has, we then, and spearheading that was definitely Gary Morenzi.
Yeah.
And Gary, who used to run head of international Paramount and Endeavor, and MGM. Gary knew that my whole thing was that I wanted to kind of do more international stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so he literally, walked me into rooms in LA. I spent a long time in LA, and he walked me personally into those rooms and introduced me to people and vouched for us, which was very important.
Yeah.
Because what I realized was that in order to do anything, obviously in Asia, we might have a reputation, but in, the West, they're like, who are you? Where's Malaysia? So I realized that in order to do anything, you'd have to do it with partners. You
Yeah.
can't do it on your own.
Yeah.
I couldn't walk into Netflix in LA, or, and so I started building co-production alliances.
Right.
So I spent time looking at that and working on it. And so through Gary, I met a company called Pillar Segan. And so Pillar Segan, so Lloyd Segan and Sean Pillar, and they produce The Dead Zone. They produce things like Haven, and we found that we had a very similar production philosophy, and we got really well. I got an email from Lloyd one day and said, you might hate me, you might love this, or you might never speak to me again. It was the best email subject I've ever received. Because of course you open that email, right? And
Yeah.
it became Gun Honey, which is the adaptation of a graphic novel from an author in New York, from Charles R. Dye, that we are now, about a Singapore born. Although I said to him, the one thing, if you do this, is she has to be Malaysian. So
There are no criminals in Singapore.
yeah, because she comes from some, crime family. I said they don't exist in Singapore, or they're just very white collar, So I said, you bring her over the border. And then I got introduced to Richard Johns, who is my partner in the UK, through Fremantle. And we found we were also very much on the same page.
Yeah.
And we started Simpatico, which I think you know about, right? Which basically looks at producing really authentic, also because I was tired of like watching shows in which Asians were caricatured. You know, you have Western shows in which Asians are caricatures in Western shows, and then you also have the Asian shows where the Western guy is the mustache twirling villain. And it's just neither of it feels authentic. But I think one of the big things that we got right with the bridge was that it always felt authentic. And
Yeah.
I think we kind of struck gold with that, or storytelling, right? And
Yes.
so and so I found partners who were really on the same page as us as the type of shows that we want to make. So I started setting up these co-production alliances, and through that, like, today we have several projects in the pipeline. We've got, a 6-part limited series with Luke Evans attached. So these are the things that we've built in kind of the last 5 years, because when the world shut down, all we did was develop. So a lot of that comes
Right.
from original IP that we co-develop with our partners
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
It's good stuff. Looking ahead, obviously the media business is still in a weird place. I think there's a lot of uncertainty hanging over a lot of companies, a lot of executives. We've got vertical video that seems to be taking over a lot of people's time, especially in Asia. Sort of what are you plotting for 2026 and beyond as you focus on the things that matter to you, great storytelling, running a fantastic company, while also making sense of just this weird media ecosystem that we are all living in?
My question
Man.
or your question?
Yours.
Mine.
So yeah, I mean, we obviously.
You said mine.
Okay.
No, okay, you go first.
Just the intro. We are obviously operating this along the same lines as we have done all these years, i.e., no grand vision of where we want to be, but just looking at what's in the horizon and trying to make sense of it. And so there's no way you're going to ignore the popularity or the onset of verticals or
Yeah.
micro dramas, right? And so we have therefore got ourselves also into that space that then puts us in a map in a way that is a kind of a plug and play for us, because the people we're working with already have both channels of their own as well as white label channels that they flip to telcos and stuff like that, right?
Right.
But we bring the whole production capability into the equation,
And
into a
localization.
system where they're already monetizing and they know how to put it out there, but they are not the production people. So
Yeah.
that's really where we are at with verticals.
I mean, I think that's the key, right? I think this is like anything new. I think the first question we're always asking is, how do you monetize?
Yeah.
Everybody's like, are you getting into it? I mean, yes, but where's my money coming? I mean, we're Chinese after all, so I think it's true. It's true. Passion doesn't pay the bills, as I keep getting reminded,
Indeed.
like, it's like I took some time off because I directed my first film this year. Yeah, so I directed my first film, and then of course, as I finished and about a couple of months into edit, I get this call from Dad, and he goes, "So when are you coming back to your day job?" I was like, "I am doing my day job. Thank you very much." But no, for us, it's always like, but when can you how to monetize, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's very important, also to work with people who understand the space more than us, because I think we've been around long enough to also know that we don't know everything.
Yeah.
Or rather, you need partners
Yes,
to work with, who bring certain capabilities or expertise to the table that would fast track us rather than take us time to go and develop by ourselves.
Yeah. Sure.
right. And we've done this kind of all throughout, our 40
Yeah.
years. And I think for me, it's really to grow. I think where I see the future is production. I think production in a big way is going to be, especially in our part of the world, is going to get more and more prominent. And I think there's a lot of opportunity in Asia, a lot of untapped opportunity in Asia. I think I wrote an op-ed for TBI a couple years ago saying that I feel that the West looks at Asia like the guys in the in Aladdin in the Agrabah market. That they're really, and Asia's the diamond in the rough. I
Yeah.
really think. I think if you know where to look, you will find gems. But
Yeah.
often people don't spend the time. And I think that because we're based here, we know how to take advantage of that, and we know how, with partners, to take that to a global, to a kind of international level,
Yeah.
both on the film and the TV side, right? I think the dream
Yes.
for me is to be a DreamWorks, funnily enough, where it's a studio and that was largely independent for a long time,
Yeah.
built by creatives, but also churning out some really commercially successful programming. But
Mm.
really, it was creators at the core, because I think you can see a lot, especially in the West, where production decisions are made by committee, made
Mm.
by it's
Algorithms.
algorithms. You know, it
Yeah.
has no creative soul, and I think you need that, right? And so that's kind of what I'm looking at building, coming out of our part of the world,
Yeah.
but for the rest of the world, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
In the end, it's the filmmaker sensitivities that make the product successful, right? Hence, you look at the Shonda Rhimes of the world and so forth. The Rhymer piece, they are all filmmakers at heart, or content creators at heart, and that's what drives everything else, right? So
Yeah.
it has to come from there first, not something that's designed by committee, or worse, that's determined by AI or algorithms, right? You can't just tick off the boxes and then say, okay, this is it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Does that answer the question?
No, it does answer the question, and I think it explains why you've been able to be around for so long, because you have remained focused on what matters. Despite what's swirling around us, you are focused on what matters, which is great creativity and running a company in a smart way. I think that's what it's all about today. Absolutely. Is there anything else that you wanted to tell me, our readers, as you mark this amazing milestone about sort of what's ahead for Vision?
I think I've grown up in an environment where I've been, and I hate to use the word because it gets used on Instagram way too much, is that I've been very privileged and blessed to be in a company or to be part of something where you can really look long term.
Yeah.
You know, today nobody has tenure. I think if, so many of the reunions of kind of his generation of kind of business associates who've become friends,
Yeah.
right? I think those guys had tenure. And so they talk about a time in which you could do deals, and sometimes I take less and you take more, and sometimes it's going to be the other way around, right? But
Yeah.
that's what kept the business going. And I think that very few people can do that today. Everybody's looking at a 2-year contract. Everybody is looking at the short term.
and
But
instant gratification, because
Correct.
you've got deliverable KPIs and profit targets almost every quarter, if not every month, right?
Right.
And sometimes, they have no choice but to screw you over for it because it's their head on the chopping block. Whereas I think I can sit back and say, okay, let's look 5-10 years down the line, and where do we want to be? We take a loss this year. We don't do too much production this year. I mean, I made a very concerted effort and a very concerted decision, actually, to at one time stop or do much less local in this kind of search for international, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of slowly paying off, but it's taking a lot long. Frankly, it's taking a lot longer than I would have liked. Did I make the right decision? I don't know, but I have the privilege of being able to do that, and I count myself very lucky, right?
Yeah.
So I think that I can look at building something and actually have quite a good chance of getting there. If I don't fuck up too badly, have a pretty good chance of getting there, because we can, because I can, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I think has been great for us. Should he retire? No, God, no. My mother would die. He should continue coming to the office. But the thing is, we actually do enjoy working together.
Yeah, it's
We
great.
we do enjoy working together.
No, I think it's obvious that you can see the way we banter and the way we, right? This is how we work in a way,
Yeah.
right? So we've been very close after all, she's the only child, but we've been very close as
I could
father,
have been an
daughter,
idiot.
whatever. And yeah, true. But then if we were incepting you right from the beginning, you won't be an idiot. So, but also it's in a sense, the milestone year is not just because it's 40 years. It's also in many ways a handing over period for us, or for me, right? I'm almost mid-70s. So, there's only so much I will be there, but
Warren
I'm not.
Buffett went to 95. You have like another
True.
20 years left.
True. But I don't want, or in many ways, you don't really want to go pound the floor in midcoms. You don't want to go from stand to stand. You know, I mean, what we used to do before.
Yeah.
So, in a way, it's a passing over of the legacy. Not that I'm quitting or out, but it has to, where the burden or the load sits on someone else's shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is also that kind of a landmark year for us.
And I mean, we've had I think we've been working together like 10 years now, something like that. We've been, and we live across from each other, so it still works to some degree, right? But I think it's also the fact that how I tell people is I have a partner who actually trusts me, which is great, especially because he's my father, right? And many parent-child relationships in business don't work for this very reason.
Yeah.
He trusts me, and he's somebody who not just wants the best for our company, but probably wants the best for me,
Yeah.
for himself. And that's just incredibly impossible to find unless you are in this position, right? And so I think that with that, if I of all people should be able to do something with this support and with this help and with this trust, and if not, then I would have severely screwed up.
Indeed. Well, Min Teck, thank you so much. This has been such a joy to get the vision story. I love it. I really appreciate you taking the time with me today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Screen MDM Talks podcast hosted by me, Mantra Daswani. Kate Roach is our VP of Global Ad Sales and Business Development. Production was done by Anand Patel. Musical score performed and composed by Jahan Raymond.